Hey guys, it's Andre and welcome back to my shelf. I know it's already March 2025, but hey, the Crunchyroll Anime Awards aren't even until May, so I think it's about as good a time as any to look back at the year of 2024 and count down my top 10 favorite anime of the year. Before I talk about my personal favorites, let's recap the year. 2024 saw a lot of interesting trends in the anime industry. First off, it seems like we're seeing the comeback of non-isekai fantasy anime with high-quality manga adaptations of Frieren and Dungeon Meshi, which are both getting second seasons, and the announcement of Witch Hat Atelier. It also feels like we're seeing the comeback of the 2-core anime season, which recently has felt like a rare gift. But last year we had Frieren with 28 episodes, Dungeon Meshi with 24 episodes, Undead Unluck with 24, and both Orb and Blue Box recently with 25 episodes each. Personally, I feel like this is the anime industry learning its lesson after Chainsaw Man, which really should have been 2 cores. That said, I am looking forward to the Resident movie this year. But anyway, 2024 was also a great year for girl band anime with works like Girls Band Cry, Jellyfish Can't Swim in the Night, Whisper Me a Love Song, the Bocchi the Rock recap films, and Naoko Yamada's Kimi no Iro, or The Colors Within. Although, I guess you can't say it was a great year for Girls Band Cry or Whisper Me a Love Song. But it was a great year for girls and another type of band. 2024 also saw a trend in classic anime getting reboots or sequels announced, including Ranma 1/2, Dragon Ball Daima, Jigoku Sensei Nube, Magic Knight Rayearth, Rose of Versailles, Yaiba, Cat's Eye, Anne of Green Gables, and, well, this was technically announced in 2023, but I'm still kind of baffled that we're getting a One Piece reboot while the current anime is still airing? Like, is that still real? Is the One Piece real? Speaking of reboots and sequels, Monogatari fans had a fun year, both with the release of Kizumonogatari Koyomi Vamp in theaters, as well as the long-awaited Monogatari series Off and Monster Season. Speaking of long-awaited, we finally got the Uzumaki anime after 4 years of delays, and it was totally worth the wait, no notes. Here in the US, we also finally got the 2 Gurren Lagann films released theatrically back in January. We also got to see the end of Evangelion in theaters for the first time here as well back in March. And for some reason in December, they made a Lord of the Rings anime film for theaters, which was watched by me, my friend, and literally nobody else. But hey, at least the movie got made and the artists who worked on it got to have their work seen. That's pretty cool. And now a moment of silence for Yuri on Ice Adolescence. Shonen fans are eating good this year, as they do most years, with adaptations of Solo Leveling, Kaiju No. 8, The Elusive Samurai, Season 2 of Oshinoko, Season 2 of Bling Bong Bong Bling Bong Bong Bling Bong Bong Born, Part 3 of Thousand Year Blood War, Demon Slayer's Hashira Training Arc, One Piece's Egghead Island Arc, Look Back, Blue Box, Dan Da Dan, and more. Shoujosei fans got a few bites here and there with shows like A Sign of Affection, A Condition Called Love, Nina the Starry Bride, The Do-Over Damsel, and The Demon Prince of Momochi House. And they saw the return of Natsume's Book of Friends and Kimi ni Todoke. Speaking of romance, there were some other popular ones last year like Makein, Too Many Losing Heroines, Alia Sometimes Hides Your Feelings in Russian, Yakuza Fiancé, The Dangers in My Heart Season 2, Blue Box of course, and even a remake of Spice and Wolf, if that counts. Man, that's another remake of an old show. Well, speaking of being remade or reincarnated, we got a lot of isekais last year again, including continuations of Re:Zero, Slime, Mushoku Tensei, and Konosuba, and I guess Suicide Squad isekai was also a thing. Anyway, as seems to be the trend, there were more anime than ever before in 2024. Last couple mentions, there was the Dead Dead Demons Dead Destruction movie, the Shoshimin series from the creator of Hyoka, there was Shika no Noko Noko Koshi Tantan, Shika no Noko Noko Koshi Tantan, and there was PA Works surprising us with 3 anime all in the same season. Were they good? My Naka Punch was alright. On a serious note, in 2024 we also mourned the losses of many figures in the anime industry, big and small, including voice actors Eiko Masuyama, Noriko Ohara, Emi Shinohara, Atsuko Tanaka, Doc Harris, and Rachel Lillis, art director Ryo Kono, producer Hiroyuki Omori, horror manga artist Kazuo Umezu, singer-songwriter Sayuri, and of course, the legendary Akira Toriyama, just to name a few. Let's continue to celebrate their lives and enjoy the work they left behind for us. May they all rest in peace. All in all, I think this was honestly a pretty decent year for anime with some really big highlights. So let's talk about my personal faves, my top 10. But first, let's lay down the rules. In order to be on this arbitrary list I made based on my own personal feelings, an anime series must have
and release one core or 12 episodes and end of the season within the calendar year 2024. That means that shows that began in fall 2023 but ended in 2024 are eligible, so that would include shows like Undead Unluck and Frieren. However, shows like Orb and Blue Box, which started in fall 2024 but did not finish their seasons before 2025 started, are not eligible and will not be on this list, even though I do like those shows, but who knows, they may end up on the list for next year. Secondly, movies and short films are eligible to be on this list as long as they have their wide public release in the United States, since that's where I live, within the calendar year of 2024. And a wide public release can mean either theatrical release or streaming release, but does not include exclusive film festival or anime convention screenings. For that reason, Kori's Within or Kingdom of Hero, which had its US theatrical release in January 2025, will not be on this list, as much as I liked it.
Lastly, just remember to be nice to each other and to me in the comments. This is my personal list. I can guarantee you will not have the same list as me, but be sure to let me know what your list is down below. This is a celebration of 2024 anime, so let's keep it positive and share the love. Also, just a heads up for the structure of this video, the first 5 anime that I'm going to be talking about are basically honorable mentions. I ranked them numbers 10 through 6, but I'm not going to go into much detail talking about them. The top 5 though, and especially the top 3, I will be talking a lot more in detail on. So without any further ado, let's kick off the list with my honorable mentions, starting with number 10. At number 10 is the Elusive Samurai, or Nigejozu no Wakagimi, episode 1 specifically. Alright, I'm gonna have to be totally honest, this is probably a weird way to start off this list, but I actually didn't finish watching the Elusive Samurai. I didn't love the series overall, so it's not actually here on my number 10 spot as a whole series, but its first episode was so impressive to me that I just had to put it here. Studio Cloverworks brilliantly brought to life Yusei Matsui's Shonen Jump samurai manga with this opening episode. The colors, the animation, the cinematography, the music, the editing, it's so atmospheric and so cinematic that, no shade, but even Yusei Matsui's jarring sense of humor can't undercut the incredible work here by director Yuta Yamazaki and his team. Unfortunately, the rest of the series is wildly inconsistent in terms of the production quality, on top of having a story that doesn't appeal all that much to me personally, which is why I never finished the show. That said, from what I watched, I think like 8 episodes, certain episodes are as breathtaking or almost as breathtaking as episode 1, so it might still be worth watching the whole show for those. Episode 6 in particular, directed by Yoko Kikuchi, has some mind-blowingly creative sequences, including a full-on papercraft stop-motion animation scene. At number 9 is Negapazi Angler, directed by Yutaka Uemura. One of my favorite tropes in anime is when slice-of-life shows are about niche hobbies or occupations. Shows like Do It Yourself, Yama no Susume, Aquatope on White Sand, and Hanasaku Iroha. The value of shows like these is you get to hang out with the same small group of characters every week, and you get to learn about something you likely wouldn't have otherwise. And Negapazi Angler is a great addition to that subgenre, being a slice-of-life anime about fishing, specifically fishing as a hobby. Honestly, there isn't that much to say about this show other than the fact that it's a cute, chill comedy with fun character designs and animation. Plus, it's one of the few original anime, as in not based on any source material, that came out last year. During the fall season, it was definitely one of my favorite shows to return to every week. And since I highlighted my favorite episode of The Elusive Samurai, I think I might as well highlight my favorite episode of the other anime on this list. So for Negapazi Angler, to be honest, it's a bit hard to pick an episode for this show because they're all just so chill for the most part. I mean, the show does start and end with some heavier themes and drama, but most of the show is pretty light. Anyway, I think I'll go with episode 6, Thai Lover, directed by Satoshi Miura. We get lots of Ice, who's the best character, and it has a very wholesome ending with all the characters getting together for a dinner party. My number 8 is One Piece Fan Letter, directed by Megumi Ishitani. As the name implies, this short film is basically an official love letter to the fans of One Piece, depicting the pivotal events of the Paramount War and the Straw Hat Pirates' return to Sabaody from the perspectives of normal people, those who have found themselves inspired or influenced by who we know as the main heroes of the story. One Piece fan letter continues Megumi Ishitani's incredible directorial work on One Piece, following her direction for the 25th and 26th openings, as well as the masterful episode 1015, which I made a whole video analysis on years ago. Combine that with Keisuke Mori's incredible animation work, and you get yet another fantastic addition to the One Piece canon, with a heartfelt story about the impact that stories can have on people, big and small, as well as the impact that fans can have on those stories and the heroes involved. My number 7 is Dandadan, directed by Fuga Yamashiro. I think most people are going to have this higher on their list, but for me personally, I already read the manga, so the anime was never going to be as fresh to me, but it's still a hell of a good time. With wildly expressive animation and color design from the team at Science Saru, led by director Fuga Yamashiro, the Dandadan anime delivers on the gags and the tonal swings of the manga while also giving us thrilling action, cinematography, and perhaps the best OST and opening and ending of the year. The one downside about this first season, or core, is that it just ends abruptly in the middle of something. But obviously that complaint will have no bearing once the next episode comes out this July. My favorite episode of Dandadan, well, it's probably kind of obvious, but it has to be, come on, episode 7, To a Kinder World, directed by Kotaro Matsunaga. Everything I said about the first episode of The Elusive Samurai applies here too. Content-wise, this comes from a very emotional chapter of the manga, and the adaptation makes full use of the medium of animation and cinema to make it as immersive, gut-wrenching, and visceral as possible. Director Matsunaga was also clever enough to leave certain things out, or a little bit vague, for the audience to piece together on their own. Visual storytelling at its absolute finest. My number 6 is A Sign of Affection, or Yubisaki to Renren, directed by Yuta Murano. A romance anime about two college students, Yuki, a shy deaf girl, and Itsuomi, a hot guy who travels a lot. There's a lot of romance anime out there, but this one stands out to me because 1, it's about adults, not high school or middle school students like usual, and 2, it's about a deaf person, but without primarily being about the trauma or hardships sometimes associated with being deaf. Sure, Yuki has day-to-day inconveniences due to her deafness, but it doesn't completely define every waking moment of who she is or what this story is about. She's just a normal girl who falls in love with this relatively normal dude, and they have a very wholesome relationship, and it's a very wholesome show. Also, I think it's really cool that the show has dedicated sign language animators. Like, you can tell they really wanted to make sure that that was done as accurately and as nuanced as possible. Anyway, my favorite episode of A Sign of Affection is actually one that isn't primarily about Yuki and Itsuomi at all. My favorite episode is episode 8, One Small Step, directed by Yuta Murano. In this episode, we actually get the backstory of two side characters, Shin and Emma, who find themselves in the losing positions in a love triangle, or love square? Anyway, I think it's a really sweet, well, bittersweet episode that sheds light on two characters I didn't really care much about before. But with that, that's the end of my honorable mentions. Let's move on to the cream of the crop, my top 5 anime of 2024. Alright, we're standing up now. My number 5 favorite anime of 2024 is Delicious in Dungeon, aka Dungeon Meshi. Dungeon Meshi.
Dungeon Meshi.
What a weird show. It's interesting because at first it just feels like a simple medieval fantasy adventure comedy with a monster of the week format. But you know, instead of just fighting the monsters, they're also cooking and eating them. The show follows a party of adventurers led by a human warrior named Laios. We have Marcial the elf mage, Chilchuck the half-foot locksmith, and Senshi the dwarf warrior and cook. Their mission? To travel back down to the depths of a dungeon to save Laios' sister Fallon from being fully digested by a dragon that previously defeated their party and ate her. But because they're low on money and food for their journey, they must learn how to hunt, prepare, and cook the wildlife around them, aka the dungeon monsters. Now, despite the urgency and seriousness that premise implies, this show is very comedic and episodic, at least at first. In the beginning, Dungeon Meshi finds its entertainment simply from the creative explanations and gags that arise from turning classic RPG monsters like slimes and basilisks into everyday looking dishes, and how the show turns the dungeon itself into a believable ecosystem. This is of course supported by director Yoshihiro Miyajima and Studio Trigger's, as usual, wonderfully expressive animation, comedic editing, and versatile character designs. Not to mention the characters themselves are all extremely charming and relatable in their own ways. As a monster enthusiast, Laios' drive to save his sister is only surpassed by his hyperfixation on his hobby, which often tunnels his vision and leads him to being socially awkward at times. Something I definitely can relate to. Marcile's anxious personality may cause her to be overly wary, sometimes a stick in the mud, and occasionally insecure about her value to the team, but it also keeps the group grounded. Chilchuk's youthful appearance contrasts hilariously with his high level of skill and too old for this shit attitude, and Senshi's just the reliable, wholesome adult we all love who makes sure the young'uns never go hungry. But he also has his own doubts and fears. Speaking of which, I did say this show was weird, right? What I meant by that is that this show has a really interesting relationship with tone, which I kind of admire. The show takes the premise seriously that the party must make it to the dragon before Laios' sister Fallon is fully digested and dies, but it also is a very silly comedy about cooking monsters. And the show can sometimes whip from that really lighthearted tone to a really morbid and dark tone from one scene to the next, particularly as you get further and further into the meat of the story. In most shows, that's called tonal whiplash, and it feels like the show is confused about its identity. But for Dungeon Meshi, at least for me, I see it as a natural progression of the show's unique way of storytelling and its themes about cooking responsibly and observing the circle of life. This is a show about eating, after all, and that is typically a joyful activity, but it also involves the death of living things, and it surprised me how much the show is willing to go down those dark thematic roads while continuing to make you laugh. My favorite episode of Dungeon Meshi is probably between episode 12, Red Dragon 2, directed by Kiyota Chiho, and episode 19, Hag and Nightmare, directed by Nakano Kodai. Two episodes that really lean into some of Dungeon Meshi's darker subject matter and seize the opportunity visually and directorially, pushing those episodes towards the horror genre. Anyway, Dungeon Meshi is a very unique show and I'm excited for season 2, but I'm done meshing around. Let's move on to my number 4. My number 4 is The Apothecary Diaries, or Kusuriya no Hitorigoto, directed by Norihiro Naganuma. This is an awesome series that's part slice of life, part period drama, and part mystery. The story follows Mao Mao, an apothecary, aka medicine maker, working in the Pleasure District near the capital of a fictional country which totally isn't Imperial China. One day, she gets kidnapped and sold off to the Emperor's palace as a servant, where she finds herself using her medicinal skills in the role of a poison taste tester for a high-ranking concubine and solving mysteries along the way. This show's biggest strength is its characters, particularly its protagonist, Mao Mao. Being an apothecary, she is equal parts intelligent and curious, brave yet cautious, and unassuming yet beautiful. Or just totally feral. She is such a well-realized and richly developed character that you can't help but be taken by her unique charms the same way some of the other characters do. Mao Mao's passions lie in drug making and mystery solving, instead of in the traditional things women in this society are expected to care about, like beauty or romance, and she is able to find success because of that, which I find very inspiring. Some of my other favorite characters include Lady Gyokuyo, the high-ranking concubine whom Mao Mao serves as a poison taster, Jinshi, the handsome and mysterious official who captures the eyes of every woman in the palace, except for Mao Mao's, and Gao Shun, his reliable assistant who manages to keep Jinshi's sometimes childish personality in check. But Apothecary Diaries' most interesting aspect for me is the setting. The show takes place in a world and time period where traditional gender roles are set firmly in stone, and the patriarchal society revolves around one man, the Emperor. Within the palace, the highest-ranking women are the Emperor's concubines, and those below them are servants or court ladies, while the men serve roles in the military, or when they are appointed in roles that interact with the Emperor's concubines, they are physically castrated to serve as eunuchs. Just outside the palace, the most respected women in society are the courtesans of the Pleasure District. This societal structure, of course, doesn't leave a lot of room for individual freedoms, dreams, and aspirations, particularly for women, and the show properly dives into the very specific annoyances, struggles, and dangers they face in this setting, where politics and social dynamics are turbulent, and poisonings and assassination attempts are commonplace. so commonplace that it warrants hiring dedicated poison taste testers like Mao Mao, who herself is the product of a pretty traumatic parental backstory. And yet, despite the darkness present in this setting, like Dungeon Meshi, Apothecary Diaries manages to balance the tone with a healthy amount of light. After all, the show's biggest theme resulting from this setting is encouraging people to embrace their uniquenesses and to create opportunities for themselves to thrive within a system set up to predefine or suppress them. In other words, when a broken system can't be changed, don't let the system change you. Become a flower and bloom. Another big reason I love this show is the relationships between some of the characters are just super wholesome, and many episodes left me with a warm feeling that overall made the show a joy to watch. The way Gyokuyo and her ladies-in-waiting care for each other, the way the 3 highest-ranking concubines in the Pleasure District treat Mao Mao like a little sister, the way Gaoshin looks after Mao Mao in his own way, and the way that people in general look after each other and show love and gratitude when they do in this show is just very heartwarming. Plus, the episodic mysteries and overarching plot threads are consistently entertaining. Although there are aspects of a few mysteries that left me a little confused even on a rewatch. But in any case, I still love the show overall, obviously, and we are so fortunate to have a 24 episode season 1 and an ongoing season 2 of the same length. The more Mao Mao, the better. As far as my favorite episode goes, this was actually really hard to pick. To be honest, there isn't really a specific episode that stands out head and shoulders above the rest for me. They're all pretty equally great. But I think I'm gonna go with episode 4, titled The Threat, and directed by China. In this episode, Mao Mao is tasked to care for concubine Li Hua, whose condition has worsened after the death of her child. But Li Hua's stubborn ladies-in-waiting stand in Mao Mao's way. I love this episode because we get to see Mao Mao use her medical knowledge to great effect, and it's so satisfying to see her finally get through to Li Hua's ladies-in-waiting. You could say when it came to treating concubine Li Hua, Mao Mao apothecaried, I'll see myself out. But genuinely, Apothecary Diaries is an amazing show, so if you haven't checked it out yet, please add it to your watch list. You deserve it. But let's move on to my number 3. My number 3 is Frieren Beyond Journey's End, aka Soul Soul no Frieren, directed by Keiichiro Saito. Now, it probably doesn't surprise any of you that this made it on my list, but considering it's literally the number 1 highest rated anime of all time on some sites, it may surprise you that it didn't end up higher. Frieren is not a perfect show for me. I do have some criticisms, but I do still think it's a masterful show, overall deserving of its hype, and the positives far outweigh the negatives. So let's first talk about the positives. Frieren Beyond Journey's End, as the title suggests, is an afterstory. Decades after the ageless elf mage Frieren returns from her 10-year-long journey with the hero's party to defeat the Demon King, the leader of the party, Himmel the hero, passes away of old age. Realizing she failed to cherish the time she had with him, Frieren decides to go on another adventure to retrace their steps, reunite with old friends, and treasure her new ones. And what makes this show so interesting is Frieren's lifespan. She has apparently lived for thousands of years, and it's obviously had an effect on her, and on the way she interacts with people. As you would imagine, a major theme of Frieren is time. How we experience and perceive it, and how we use it. And I love the way the story is constructed around that theme. It takes place after the most eventful period of our protagonist's life, and yet it tells us that this part of her story is more important. Because Frieren's story isn't about an epic battle to save the world from evil, it's a story about a person who spent several hundred lifetimes in isolation, stepping outside of her comfort zone and learning the value of human connection. That's the show's true main thesis, and I think it's one that we can all relate to, especially after the whole, real life pandemic situation where we all kind of experienced isolation. But even when she does spend 10 whole years with the same group of people, it takes Frieren a long time to realize the radical influence that experience had on her life.
たった10年の冒険だよ。
100分の1か。面白いものだな。
何が？
その100分の1がお前を変えたんだ。
In fact, it doesn't hit her until after Himmel's death. As we learn over the course of the series, Himmel was probably the person she spent the most time with, and who showed the most interest in her besides her master who passed away centuries ago. Himmel is also the person who imparted much of the wisdom that would shape her as a person moving forward.
覚えていてもらうためにはどうすればいいんだろう。
ほんの少しでいい。誰かの人生を変えてあげればいい。きっとそれだけで十分なんだ。
So, Frieren decides to take on another adventure, this time doing her best not to make the same mistake again by cherishing every moment she spends with her new party, which includes her magic apprentice Fern and the young warrior Stark. That's why we experience the present day story in relatively real time, and we only get snippets of her adventure with the hero's party through flashbacks, as her new adventure with Fern and Stark brings back memories of that time. The story structure is made to put us in Frieren's perspective. I think that's pretty clever, but at the same time, and this is a little off topic, but it does surprise me how popular and highly rated Frieren is. Obviously, I agree with the hype, but I feel like most shows that receive this much hype are a lot more plot-driven or action-focused. Frieren is extremely episodic. Even the episodes individually are episodic, in that the 24-minute runtimes are usually made up of two relatively unrelated 12-minute stories, each with their own plot or character arc, and often each imparting their own poignant life lesson about, things like caring for others or finding your path. Speaking of which, it wouldn't be totally unfair to call Frieren a little preachy with its life lessons, but that description would belie how truly enjoyable this show is. The episodic nature of the show doesn't bother me at all as a lover of slices of life and Iyashikei, but to those it might, I will assure you that Frieren is also one of the most stunningly beautiful anime I've ever seen, with an incredibly epic soundtrack and some of the most thrilling sakuga-filled action scenes of the decade. The show does not feel like homework to watch. It's genuinely fun with plenty of lightness and humor. After all, one of the show's main messages is that even when you're on an important, high-stakes mission to save the world, there's no reason for fun not to be a significant part of that adventure. And the show's preference for episodic, low-stakes stories for most of the season is, in a way, an encapsulation of one of its other big themes, that small actions are more impactful than big, world-changing ones.
きっとこんなことをしたって世界は変わらない。でも僕は目の前で困っている人を見捨てるつもりはないよ。
大丈夫だよ、ヒンメル。世界はちゃんと変わっている。
And indeed for me, it was these smaller standalone episodes of Frieren that impacted me more than the big multi-episode story arcs. Speaking of which, I do want to talk a little bit about the Aura story arc, and specifically this show's approach to depicting demons. Okay. I know this is a highly debated, controversial topic, but in my opinion, most high fantasy works of fiction that I know of have trouble with the whole evil demonic race thing. And to be fair, if you want to write about a race of evil monsters that your heroes are totally justified in killing without reservation, despite the fact that they are at least somewhat intelligent and can speak like humans, it's hard not to make that feel a little sus. Even Dungeon Meshi struggled with that a bit, though in a different way. And Frieren is unfortunately no exception. And it's why this arc in the middle of the season is kind of my least favorite part of the show. After all, for a show all about the value of connecting and cherishing your time with other people, it feels pretty out of step for it to say, yeah, except for these guys, never trust a word they say, and if you have the chance, just kill them on the spot. At least that is Frieren's belief about demons, and rather than the story challenging that idea, she is totally validated by the end of the arc. But that being said, upon a second viewing, I did start to see a more positive read on this arc that ties back into the show's good faith themes about human connection, and maybe this is what the original author Kanehito Yamada was going for. If we take what the show says about demons at face value, that they don't truly wish to connect with humans at all, and that their apparent attempts to do so are just traps, then perhaps this arc is asking us the question, why do you make connections? Is it because you are genuinely interested in people like Himmel? Is it because you want to show you care about them like Frieren? Or is it for purely selfish reasons like the demons and you just want to use people or get something from them? And from that perspective, I do think this arc has good intentions thematically, even if it's a little clumsy communicating them. And staying on the topic of the major multi-episode story arcs in Frieren, I don't have the same issue with the Chunin exam, the first class mage exam story arc, which makes up pretty much the entirety of the second core, but because it departs from the episodic structure of my favorite Frieren episodes, it's not my favorite part of the show either. It's entertaining, for sure, and they do find ways to sprinkle in some of Himmel's wisdom here and there, which is nice, but it also bothers me a little how cliche the arc's premise is. I mean, come on, an exam arc that introduces a bunch of new characters, takes place in a deadly forest, and tasks the 3-person teams with finding a thing? I don't know, it feels a little familiar. That said, I do think the second and third exam stages are more interesting and make better use of Frieren's unique world and characters. But back to the good parts of Frieren. I want to reiterate, Frieren is this high on this list for a reason. Despite some misgivings, it is a show I genuinely love a lot. I love its insistence that everyone needs emotional support, not just children, that everybody is worthy of being remembered no matter their quote-unquote failures or lack of historical importance, that your path in life doesn't have to be dictated by idealistic things like dreams or passions, that everyone deserves to be praised or rewarded for their hard work, that fear is healthy, and its influence over your life, big or small, is what helped you make it to today, that failure is a chance for growth, and that your past doesn't define your future. And of course, don't forget to cherish the time you have with your loved ones and make the effort to get to know people. As for my favorite episode, I'm going to give it to episode 12, A Real Hero, directed by Yoshiki Kawasaki. This episode is a twofer, like many Frieren episodes, at least my favorite ones. In the first half, we learn about Himmel and the legendary hero's sword, and in the second half, we celebrate Stark's birthday and learn about his backstory with his brother. These two stories may sound a bit unrelated, but they're beautifully linked together by that theme I mentioned of not letting your past define your present or future. For me, it's one of Frieren's most poignant and heartwarming episodes, and does a fantastic job developing the character of Stark. But yeah, I genuinely feel like Frieren has something for everyone. Action, comedy, drama, character development, yashike. If you're somehow one of the only anime fans in the world who hasn't given Frieren at least a shot, consider this yet another push. Now let's move on to my number 2. Before we move on to my number 2, it's intermission time. Real talk, guys, I like movies just as much as I like anime. But whenever I talk about movies, nobody watches those videos. So if you don't mind, I'm just gonna Trojan horse in a quick segment about my top favorite movies of 2024, including anime movies, so anime fans stick around. I didn't end up seeing as many movies in 2024 as I usually do, but if you want to see my ratings for other 2024 movies, which I know you don't, but if you do, you can check out my Letterboxd. But anyway, let's get to the list. My number 5 is Civil War. Don't go into this movie with the wrong expectations. It is about a modern day American Civil War, which I realize can be a little iffy for people right now. But the story is pretty far removed from real world politics, and it's more about war journalism and the challenges of being a war photographer. I think it's a pretty interesting, very suspenseful movie. My number 4 is Nosferatu, a gothic vampire horror movie with breathtaking visuals and editing. If you love atmospheric horror movies or period horror, definitely check this one out. My number 3 is Wicked. It feels weird to put such a popular movie on my list, but what can I say? This was just a really fun, damn good time at the theater with great music, choreography, and set design. My number 2 is Challengers. This movie slaps. The toxic tennis player love triangle story is extremely entertaining, but what stands out even more is the creative camera angles, the electric editing, and the best soundtrack of the year by far. It's a travesty that this wasn't even nominated for a single Oscar, because for me, this was the most exciting movie of the year. but not the best movie of the year. My number one favorite movie of the year was The Spectacular Failure of the Star Wars Hotel. Okay, I'm just kidding. Great video though. My actual number one favorite movie of the year just so happens to conveniently be my number two favorite anime of the year. So let's just smoothly transition back to my anime list. Alright, so my number one favorite film of the year and my number two favorite anime of the year, it is one and the same, and it is Look Back. So a couple years ago, I was pretty obsessed with Chainsaw Man and Tatsuki Fujimoto's work in general. This obsession started in 2021 when Tatsuki Fujimoto released his first post-Chainsaw Man Part 1 work, a 140-page standalone one-shot called Look Back. Up till that point, I sort of just avoided Chainsaw Man and all the hype surrounding it. I figured it was just the next Shonen Jump craze and I didn't have to rush to go read it. But then I read Look Back, and it completely floored me. The idea that the author of one of the most popular modern shonen battle manga, a manga called Chainsaw Man, went and wrote a down-to-earth, tragic human drama that was as sensitive as it was inventive. Needless to say, it changed my perspective on Fujimoto and pushed me to finally read Chainsaw Man and all his other work. Fast forward to 2024 and we finally got the announcement that Look Back was getting an anime film adaptation. And I was so excited, but even with that excitement, I was not prepared for how amazing an adaptation this film would be and how much more it would make me appreciate the original one-shot, and also how much more it would open my eyes to the story's themes about purpose and fate, and most of all, the importance of art. If you're unfamiliar, Look Back follows two aspiring manga artists from childhood, Fujino and Kiyomoto, who are completely opposite in personality, but are drawn together by the same dream, to get good at art and become pros. However, fate may have different plans for them. Before I go more into it, if you haven't seen this movie, please put it in your queue right now. It's on Prime Video, it's less than an hour long. You're already watching this video, so if you have the time, definitely check it out. Especially if you're an artist, or if you have ever in your life done anything creative. This film is for you. Tatsuki Fujimoto set out to answer a really lofty question when he put together this story. Why do you make art? Why does anyone make art? And in crafting this portrait of these two aspiring manga artists, Fujino and Kiyomoto, he and director Kiyotaka Oshiyama answered those questions while capturing the experience of what it's like being an artist and growing up with that creative bone in your body. When Fujino is praised by her classmates for her manga, it gets to her head how talented she is, which is obviously not a great thing, to be arrogant, but on the positive side, it encourages her to continue making manga. When Fujino and her classmates discover Kiyomoto's artwork and they realize that she may be leagues better than Fujino, it drives Fujino to spend all her free time practicing her drawing skills to catch up and regain the attention and awe of her peers. But years of hard work go by and Fujino receives a rude awakening that her peers no longer give a shit about her manga or her drawing skills, and at the same time, Kiyomoto's skills have also improved so much that Fujino hasn't even closed the gap. Add to that her declining grades and the worried looks from her friends and family, and Fujino naturally questions herself. What was all this hard work for? I don't want to give away the whole film for anyone still watching this video who hasn't seen it or read the manga, especially considering how short it is, but even this small little part of the story I find completely riveting and almost sickeningly relatable. So this film asks, what's the point of hard work when you know someone will always be better than you? For Fujino, what's the point of continuing to draw manga? I mean, as she says in the movie,
だいたい漫画ってさ、私書くの好きじゃないんだよね。楽しくないし、めんどくさいだけだし、超地味だし。一日中ずっと絵描いてても全然完成しないんだよ。読むだけにしといた方がいいよね。書くもんじゃないよ。じゃあ、藤野ちゃんはなんで描いてるの？
I think Tatsuki Fujimoto and Kiyotaka Oshiyama came to the conclusion that despite all the tedium and heartache and disappointment that can come with making and sharing art, the ultimate gift that art gives us is human connection. Of course, most artists also simply enjoy the act of making art itself, and not all artists make art to share with others, but if we zoom out and look at the role art plays in society and culture, you can't deny its power to bring people together. And we were just talking about how Frieren approaches that same theme, but art doesn't necessarily have to specifically be about human connection in order to encourage or inspire it, because art itself is a connection. It connects artists and audiences together, audiences to each other, artists to each other. It can change outlooks, change lives, inspire, even save people, or just give people a chuckle and some passive entertainment. But undeniably, art is elastic. One of my favorite little moments in Look Back is this one here, late in the movie when Fujino is crying while rereading her own manga series, Shark Kick, as she is only now realizing why she created it in the first place. Even though it's clearly not an emotional scene, she's brought to tears. Art is elastic. It speaks to different people in different ways at different times. Shark Kick didn't carry this weight for Fujino when she originally wrote it, or at least she didn't realize it, but now it does. And it probably doesn't carry such a weight for most of her readers, but maybe for some of them it does. Maybe some of her readers met people and bonded through her manga the same way she met Kyomoto. That's why, to go on a slight tangent, I dislike when people call any piece of media or art pretentious. If you didn't get it, quote unquote, it's not because it's pretentious, nor does it mean anything about your intelligence or taste or anyone else's. It just means that you're not part of the audience that this piece of art happens to speak to, at least not at this moment in time. Art speaks to different people in different ways at different times. Look Back also makes me think about the selfless and selfish sides of making and sharing art, personifying those sides as Kyomoto and Fujino. On one hand, it feels almost noble in a way to make art that entertains people or puts smiles on their faces, or better yet, inspires them. But the selfish side is in wanting audiences to give your work their time and attention, and in how you deal with the praise, criticism, and discussion that your art stirs. There's selfless artists and selfish artists, but the vast majority have both sides within them, either making art for themselves that they hope will reach others, or making art for others that they hope to bring part of themselves into. Look Back is a stunning adaptation and interpretation of the original manga, complete with gorgeous hand-drawn animation that captures the personality of Fujimoto's uniquely delicate art and fantastical directorial choices from Kiyotaka Oshiyama that add to the experience for people who have already read the manga. That said, it does feel a little unfair not to nitpick at least some small little thing to balance out my praise. And all I can really come up with is that due to the, change in medium from manga to anime, there are obviously some differences in how the story is told visually. Some moments I prefer how it was done in the manga format, with Fujimoto's idiosyncratic drawings, panel transitions, and page turns. But some moments I love how the anime adapts it. Also, the original soundtrack in the film by Haruka Nakamura is beautiful. But part of me does feel like it can be a bit heavy-handed at times with the emotions, but that could also just be me being used to, the literal silence of the manga and never imagining some of these scenes having any kind of backing track to go along with them. But in any case, I highly recommend seeking out both the anime and the manga for equally good but slightly different experiences. Look Back is a film by artists for artists, but also for anyone who has ever worked hard to achieve a goal or hone a skill. It makes me proud to have ever made art and grateful for all the art and artists who have ever been in my life. Speaking of which, let's talk about my number one favorite anime of 2024. And my number one favorite anime of 2024 is probably not a surprise to anyone who watches this channel. By the way, if you are new to this channel, thank you so much for watching this video. But yeah, let's not keep you in suspense any longer. My number one favorite anime of 2024 is San Euphonium 3. Now, I've already talked about my love for San Euphonium in my pilgrimage video, where I traveled to the opposite side of the world to visit the real-life city that the show takes place in. If you haven't seen that video and you're a UFO fan, please go check it out. But suffice to say, there are many reasons to love this show. From the gorgeous art and animation from Kyoto Animation that somehow gets better every season, the beautifully written coming-of-age story written by Ayano Takeda and adapted by Juki Hanada, and the sublime soundtrack composed by Akito Matsuda. And I also have several very personal reasons why I connect to this show so much, from my experience in wind ensembles and my experience studying abroad. And all that adds up to San Euphonium basically being my favorite anime of all time before we even got the final season. And so season 3, the final season, was my most anticipated anime of 2024 and possibly of all time. To pitch the show to anyone unfamiliar, San Euphonium, or Hibike Euphonium, is a slice-of-life drama about the fictional Kitauji High School wind ensemble and follows the coming-of-age story of a euphonium player named Kumiko. To quote myself from my pilgrimage video, San Euphonium dives down into the nuances of life on a high school club or team and the oppressive drama and politics that can pervade it. It explores the complicated nature of junior-senior relations and how individual feelings, ambitions, and obligations can compete with the goals of the group. But it's also naturally about friendship, camaraderie, and teamwork, and the complexities of those things. The final season, directed by Tatsuya Ishihara and Taichi Ogawa, depicts Kumiko's senior year of high school, where she suddenly finds herself thrust into a leadership position within the band that she doesn't feel very prepared for, all the while facing mounting pressure about her post-high school career plans, and on top of that, the arrival of a new, seemingly harmless transfer student who shakes both Kumiko and the band to their core foundational principles. This season has a lot on its plate. It's the long-awaited follow-up to 2 basically perfect seasons of television and 3 movies, and also it's the final chapter and conclusion to that story. And yet Kyoto Animation is able to surpass everything they've done before on every level, from the direction, cinematography, and character animation to the music, voice performances, and sound design, and the complex and emotional story that both warmed my heart and made me smile just as much as it shocked and devastated me. We talked earlier about how Frieren Beyond Journey's End says everyone deserves to be praised or rewarded for their hard work, and we talked about how Look Back asks the question, what's the point of hard work? San Euphonium 3 is the ultimate exploration of that theme, as well as the themes of finding your purpose and what it means to be an effective leader. San Euphonium 3 is an absolutely magnificent conclusion to my favorite anime of all time. I am so happy and grateful that it even got a conclusion, as so many anime adaptations often don't, and for its conclusion to be this damn good, it easily earns its spot as my number one favorite anime of 2024.
先生にとって理想の人ってどういう人ですか？
そうですね。正しい人でしょうか。本当の意味での正しさは皆に平等ですから。大前さんはどんな大人になりたいですか？
私もそんな人になりたいです。
As for my favorite episode, it's episode 12. Without any spoilers, episode 12, Saigo no Solace, directed by Yamamura Takuya. I'm still recovering. If you've seen it, you know what's up. But anyway, it's too bad this video is ending soon, because I could honestly talk about San Euphonium 3 for another hour and 12 minutes. And that's exactly what I'm going to be doing. Guys, it's the 10th anniversary of San Euphonium, and it's almost the 1-year anniversary of San Euphonium 3. So I'm going to be bringing back UFO Sunday with a full, in-depth, spoiler-filled analysis and celebration of San Euphonium 3 and the series as a whole, coming very soon. So subscribe and stay tuned for 11,000 words on some cute anime girls with instruments. And for all the UFO fans who watched my previous video, the unboxing, I'm so sorry to make you wait again. I know I said I gave you my full thoughts today, but it's just gonna have to wait until this next video. But for everyone else, thank you so much for watching this video. Like, subscribe. I do want to talk about 2025 stuff soon. But let me know what your favorite anime of 2024 were down in the comments below. Follow me on Blue Sky and Twitter. Have an awesome day, and let the next piece begin.